Hey Beth, it's July 4th. Happy Independence Day! Oh yeah, I hurt my hand. It's not broken, there's just a splint. It's kind of cool actually. It's like this hard plasticky stuff that she like got all wet with the hot water and then dried off and then like formed around my arm and then like wrapped it up really tight and then came back and wrapped it like not as tight, but it's good. So I like to think of Independence Day I like to think of Independence Day as more like our nation's conception, because we weren't like born yet exactly. It wasn't the day that we won our independence, it was the day that we signed the Declaration of Independence. So basically it was just the day that they decided, hey George, fuck you, and signed their names to a piece of paper and sent it across. So I was thinking a lot about the difference between revolution and rebellion. That's always been something I've been interested in. I always thought that it was you were a rebellion until you won, and then in retrospect you became a revolution, but I don't know that that's right, and so I'm gonna look it up. This one's kind of cool. This is from learnhub.org. A rebellion, the resistance to or defiance of any authority, control, or tradition. I like that because I think a rebellion doesn't necessarily need to be against like an entire regime of power. It can be against like a single rule. Revolution, overthrow and the thorough replacement of an established government or political system by the people governed. I think rebellion gets a bad rap because people think of it as being not as well thought out as a revolution, because in a revolution you have to have the replacement government already figured out and sort of like, this is what we're trying to overthrow and this is what we're trying to create with and switch out with that place of power. With a rebellion, that's not always necessary. I don't know. That's interesting. I like those definitions. Let's keep reading. Google. What do you have for me? New York Times. I like New York Times. Rebellion, not revolution. A distinction and a difference? This was published in August 27th of 1861. 1861, I think that's when the Civil War started. What are the dates for the Civil War?
April 12, 1861, April.
I was right. 1861. Okay, so this was an article that was written in the New York Times when the Civil War was first starting. So distinction might be a different way of spelling distinction back then, perhaps. It's a long time ago. Or it's a typo, but I kind of doubt that. Okay, so it quotes the Boston Republican Journal in the beginning, and it says, since the middle of March, the Southern movement has proceeded with strides so gigantic that it has passed completely out of the narrow domain of rebellion and entered upon the broad, limitless field of revolution. And then the New York Times is like, this passage from the Boston Republican Journal formulates an opinion not unfrequently expressed. It is, as we think and have before said, an erroneous one, containing a fallacy which, though purely theoretical, might readily be productive of considerable harm. The slave conspiracy has all the marks of a rebellion and none of the marks of a revolution. So basically what it says is that in the Boston Journal article, it refers to the Southern Rebellion, the pro-slavery rebellion, as being a revolution now because it got so big that when it was at like 6 states it was a rebellion, but now that it's at 10 states it's gotten so big that it must be a revolution. New York Times is like, that's not what makes a rebellion, or a revolution I mean. Okay, this is cool. Revolutions in history invariably assume the character of a revolt of an oppressed people against a government not of its own choosing. In the pro-slavery rebellion, it is not even pretended that there's any question of repression. That's interesting. So, moral of the story, I don't really know the difference between rebellion and revolution, but I don't think that it's what I thought it was before, and I think I might sort of understand what I want it to be now in my head. I guess I think that revolution has to be more thought out, in the sense that you have to have something to replace the thing that you're overthrowing. With rebellion, you're not necessarily replacing anything. Maybe. I don't know. What do you think? The quote you gave me was Tony Stark talking about Steve Rogers in Age of Ultron. So I'm pretty sure you've seen this movie, and even if you haven't, it's pretty obvious in the quote. So, mankind. That word should have a new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interest. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We are fighting for our right to live, to exist. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day. You are a gentleman and a scholar. Oh,